All right, good stuff. All right, so I'll do a quick introduction of myself. I'm currently Chief Product Officer of a kind of a next generation SSE company doing inline threat mitigation and really exciting technology, Trinity Cyber, if you want to check it out. And I'll go down the line here, starting with Michael. We got a panel of former CISOs, podcasters, go-to-market experts, investors. It's a great lineup. Go for it.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm Mike Newborn. I'm currently the Chief Information Security Officer of Navy Federal Credit Union. Been here for a little bit under 7 years now. I was formerly at McKinsey & Company, Bloomberg, and VeriSign. Great to be here.
Thanks.
And Daniel Whitenack, I'm CEO at a startup called Prediction Guard. That's my day job. And side gig is co-host of the Practical AI podcast, co-host that with principal engineer at Lockheed Martin.
I'm Michael Sutton. I'm a partner emeritus at Blue, but my day job, I'm the co-founder of a venture capital fund called Runtime Ventures, and we focus specifically on seed stage cybersecurity.
Silvio Pappalardo, CRO at Authmind. That's revenue, not risk officer. 25 years on the go-to-market side. Prior to that, federal law enforcement, non-cyber investigation, so I wanted to make sure I call that out as well.
Good. So I teased you with a little bit of what our first question is going to be. The number one question I get, especially over the last 2 months, is mythos, kind of hype or reality. And I've seen both sides, right? Is that some people say it's like Anthropic is a great marketing machine, and they don't have the CPU to support their latest model, so this is more marketing. And then others that said it really has the horsepower to find these vulnerabilities, and it needs to be rolled out in a more measured way. So I'll turn to you, Michael. What's your take on mythos? What have you seen? What have you heard? Have you been able to? Have you been kind of brought into any of those conversations, or especially being in the financial services industry?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I think the interesting thing is people are asking the wrong question with mythos. I don't think mythos is really the topic. Mythos is the canary in the coal mine. Mythos represents kind of an inflection point with technology that can discover vulnerabilities in ways that were typically very difficult to do and has significant implications for how you would manage cyber risk in a company. And so it really impacts the overall operating model. That's why it's getting a lot of attention. So I will answer your question, which is it hype or is it real? I think mythos itself is in the middle. I think there's 50 plus companies that got access to it. I've talked to several people that have used it at some of those companies. It's legit. Like it can find vulnerabilities where others couldn't. So a low vulnerability or a medium vulnerability can be chained together with other low, medium vulnerabilities and create a critical vulnerability. It can find exploitations of these vulnerabilities faster, very expensive to run. But Mythos has also kind of opened the door to using other algorithms that are not quite as powerful as Mythos that can still achieve something very similar at a more cost-effective pace or rate. So I think the real interesting story here is that Mythos represents a situation now where vulnerabilities are going to be coming at a much faster rate. The amount of time you have to fix those vulnerabilities is much slower. So as an example, 8 years ago, maybe you had a couple years before a vulnerability was exploitable. Last year, it was 23 days. Now it's less than a day, 10 hours, depending on where you look at it. That means you don't have much time to patch. And that's hard for a company with bureaucracy and it's regulated and change management. Just can't keep up with that easily without really changing your operating model. And the last thing I'll say is when you're looking at this, it means that if these vulnerabilities are coming in and you're not going to be able to prevent all of them from being exploited, you have to assume now there's going to be a lot more exploitation. And that has significant implications for where you're going to spend your money. What's important, I think it really increases the need for overall resilience. So companies have looked at their disaster recovery planning historically as like that break glass thing that I probably won't need, but I'll save for a rainy day. I think it's raining now, and it's going to be raining a lot more in the future. So those things need to be tested, tried and true. You've got to go into detection and containment. All these things you have to figure out and do earlier. And you got to do all that with the regular stuff, and you got to do it now with AI as well.
Yeah, great. Daniel, comments on Mythos. You're interacting with the G-pop out there on a regular basis with your podcast. What's the buzz?
I don't know if I'm cool enough to keep up with the hip jargon, but yeah, I think I would actually look back at our episodes, and we had this episode where we were talking about, I looked it up, it was GPT-3, which at the time, if you remember, there was also this gated release around that model with a similar kind of narrative, like this is going to destroy the world, and we need to release it in a gated way. I do think that, to Mike's point, there's a little bit of both going on here. I think, though, I would also agree that it's not irrelevant, but if Mythos didn't release and another AI model was not released for the rest of our lives, there's more than enough that already exists to trigger a complete rethink of how we need to think about cybersecurity and a whole lot of other things. So it's already transformative. We're already there. Mythos will release, and that will add kind of another piece to this puzzle that we're trying to solve. But I think it's already transformative in that way. And I think it's moving us towards, as Mike was saying, needing to respond quicker, but also bringing in automation into our operations, bringing in, somehow dealing with this asymmetry that already exists, right, in a new sort of way between attackers and defenders. And that will require us to, just like I've had to wrestle with as a founder and as an engineer, like I've had to have humility to say, hey, I don't have to review every single line of code that's released into my product. We're past that. If we need to move fast enough, I need to have automation. I need to have agentic coding in my company. And in cyber and other areas, we're going to have to bring in agents and give them agency in our operations. And that brings up a whole other set of opportunities around how do we operate those agents, how do we govern them, how do we control them.
Right. Michael?
Yeah, I think it's important that we recognize what Mythos is and is not. We have been dealing with vulnerabilities and their exploitation for 30 plus years. As Mike Newborn stated, like this is a velocity issue. I think back to the very first startup I worked at was a company in this area called iDefense. It was a threat intel company. And I think probably its greatest contribution to cybersecurity was we started something called the Vulnerability Contributor Program, where we paid researchers for discovering vulnerabilities. And like today, that doesn't seem novel at all. Now we have bug bounty programs and disclosure programs. But back then, like vulnerabilities were discovered by a handful of human beings worldwide, like hundreds, maybe a few thousand, just people that had the talent, the time, the focus to do this. And at that time, people would find them and either just turn them over to the vendors as a nice thing to do, or they would sell them in the underground to either nation states or criminals. And iDefense started this program where it was an open program and we paid them, and the vendors hated us. Like, we got slammed, we got threatened with lawsuits all the time. And why? Because, they were happy to keep their head in the sand. Like, hey, as long as nobody knows about this, I don't want the negative PR, or like maybe at least tell me behind the scenes and I'll do it quietly. But that couldn't happen forever. In a free market, things will evolve. And so anyway, that happened, and then it evolved to all vendors had disclosure programs, and then there's an entire industry of bug bounties, companies like HackerOne, BugCrowd, Synac. And so that velocity has been moving the entire time over the last 30 years, and it's been getting shorter, whereas 30 years ago it was measured in months. Now we're probably in days and weeks, and we're moving to an era where it's going to be days and even hours. So to me, that's what Mythos is all about, is shrinking that velocity. And it is absolutely an important shot of adrenaline, because this is the first time, those last 30 years, it was human beings getting faster, faster, faster. And now we have AI doing it. So it's going to be this leap. But in the end, I think we will be far better off as a society because this is now, there's no pretending. You can't keep your head in the sand. You can't live via security through obscurity. So there will be some growing pains as this happens, but Mythos is just one thing. Like, I think OpenAI is probably already there, or if not very close. I think the Chinese models are maybe 3 months behind that. Like, it's happening whether we like it or not, so let's embrace this and do the things that we should be doing anyway. Patching quickly, defense in depth, so that even if we have these vulnerabilities, there are layers of defense. So I don't think the sky is falling. I think there's going to be growing pains, but I think we're going to be in a better space when the dust settles.
Let me just get in on this.
Yeah.
I know you want to go through this, but so just to put this in perspective, and I am more on the side of the sky is falling right now, and I am trained to, like, make things not seem as bad as they are, so you listen to me and believe me and want to feel good when I'm done talking. But in this case, I feel very strongly about it. I agree with you that I think in the long run, defenders will be in a much better position. I think between now and getting to the point where defenders are there is going to be extremely painful, and I'll tell you why. I'm going to steal this. I'm not going to say where it came from, but I'll steal this. Vulnerability management for the last 4 decades, 3 or 4 decades, has been like taking a 0 interest loan out and not having to pay it back. Because we have all these vulnerabilities. Even at my company, there are 30 million vulnerabilities we patch a year. 30 million, right? Between all the systems we have and everything. And that's like for like a reasonable sized company, that's not abnormal. To actually, like, you can't fix every single one of these vulnerabilities. You have to prioritize, like, the highs, the criticals, but some of the lower ones, the medium ones, right? Those just keep getting pushed on the back burner. That's your debt that you're accruing. Now with Mythos, or Mythos-like technology, like OpenAI or whatever comes out later, we don't even know is already out there, like, that allows all those other vulnerabilities you've been ignoring to be paid back now with, like, you just discovered that it wasn't 0% interest. It was like 5% interest compounded, and the bill just came in. And that's the problem. And just to make it even hit further home now, to make it clear, when the patch comes out, even if they don't explain what the vulnerability is, the technology is good enough where that patch comes out, they can just reverse the patch, figure out where the patch was fixing the code, and reconstruct the exploitation of it. So the patch that's supposed to help you is the actual thing that now gives everyone the blueprint on how to hurt you. That's not a great place to be unless you can very quickly operationalize these technologies. And that's why I think it is doom and gloom right now. And I think the norm, last thing I'll say is, the norm is going to be, today, people get breached all the time. Or you could open the latest news articles or read about some breach or some issue. But I don't think people are saying, like, that's a pretty good company. They've only been breached twice this year. That's a trustworthy company. I think we're heading to a point where, like, that's going to be the norm. That company's only been breached twice, so yeah, they're a trustworthy one.
Yeah, I just to comment on that, like, that's exactly where the human in the loop is out, right? I think that's why we're seeing an MDR market in general struggling, because you bought a tool and it pushes the work back to the operator. That can't be the case anymore. And I think you're seeing a lot of these MDR companies that struggle to get to profitability because they have the human in the loop. The human in the loop has to be pulled out. Any kind of comment on Mythos and maybe a little bit of different take on for a go-to-market as from a side, or anything you see as maybe an opportunity?
I definitely see it as an opportunity, right? So you have more money flowing into innovative cybersecurity companies, right? So, like, what is AI security? What are they building? Because traditionally, the strategics, without naming them, move very slow or very reactive. So I think there's more money flowing into the industry. You're going to have some very focused startups that are going to build solutions that are literally an inch wide but a mile deep, that address something very, very specific, that end up getting acquired by the strategics and serve that particular pain point. So when I look at Mythos from the go-to-market side, and again, civil engineer guys, so not cyber, but how do you scale that, right? You take the human out of the loop, hyper-automation, AI to combat AI, AI-enabled red teaming, vulnerability management, et cetera, just to keep up the pace. But again, I think with the money flowing in, that's going to be the differentiator. There's going to be like one or two very innovative cybersecurity startups that literally come out of the fog of war. Everything's being formed right now. For me, I talk to founders all the time, like, what is AI security? What are you guys actually doing? What are you securing? So to figure what that is a little bit, I think this is a catalyst for it. So that I look at the positive of it. Like, it's gloom and doom from the operator side because you have to defend against all this, but from the go-to-market side, it's a ton of opportunity, and then focusing on the startups that are going to rise above the noise and actually deliver.
I would agree
on
with
it.
that. Yeah, I think there's tremendous opportunity. If you've got product right now that's differentiated, I think in the long run, maybe it'll go to the big ones like CrowdStrikes or Palos or Microsofts, but they're going to need to acquire companies with this technology, and we need something now to help us through this storm. I agree.
I think you're going to actually see the incumbents have a net short-term benefit from Mythos because there's going to be this panic of like, hey, I can't patch everything, so I have to have defense in depth. And there's going to be this recognition that, oh, hey, I have this remote office that I actually don't have my CrowdStrike deployed in. I don't have all of my remote employees going through Zscaler. So I actually think there's going to be a bit of a bump for some of the incumbents because that's going to be the quickest. We're not going to invent new technologies in the next, 3 months or whatever we have until Mythos or whatever comes out, but we can apply what we've known for many years of defense in depth.
Can't we all vibe code the solution now?
Let's give it a try.
I'll give it a shot.
The where Gartner is talking about this is like, I think they've been always talking about zero trust has kind of been the framework and frame of reference. What I see Gartner talking about, a lot of the analysts talking about, is this concept preemptive cybersecurity, right? And the idea that we have to get in front of this and stop being on our back foot, whether it comes to patching or anything. And how do we do, there's a deny, deceive, disrupt is their kind of framework. And they frame cybersecurity as and their stat that they throw out there, it's currently preemptive cybersecurity technologies make up 5% of the total cybersecurity spend today, and it's going to be 50% in the next 5 years. That is a massive shift from a spend perspective that I think, we as an early stage organization here, focusing on seed and A round, can be taking share away from those that might have a more traditional approach to how they do it, right? And I know my founder said, what are we going to do when we have to have basically a supercomputer as our desktop to support our EDR, right? It's just going to keep eating compute in order to do this. It's not a way to be able to compete. So I want to shift next to kind of trends in general, and I'll ask you to answer kind of as a buyer, as an entrepreneur, as an investor, and as a go-to-market professional. And every startup in the audience wants to know how to get in your wallet, right? And so from a trend perspective, maybe discuss what technologies kind of grab your attention, and you get approached, out in the hallway, you get approached over email by a sales rep. What from a trending perspective, what differentiates your I'll take that meeting versus send that to the bit bucket, or and I'd like you to answer that each from your various personas up here, as an investor, as a startup entrepreneur, as a go-to-market. So answer that one, as I know, there's at least 50 companies, if not more, that want to know, how do I get Navy Federal credit as a buying my technology? If they would just,
So
try it out.
I have I don't know. I like to pattern match things I understand.
Yeah.
Okay. And so it can't be that much different than dating, although I'm the last person to give dating advice. So, but I'll try, right? So you have to understand, if you want to get in my wallet, as you said, you got to understand what's important to me, what excites me, and what I don't care about, right? And you have to understand that, if you're a suitor, what's going to differentiate yourself from everyone else that wants to get in my wallet, right? And I'm going to figure out a way to use this when I get off stage, because my brain is going to many different places right now. So I think first of all, I'm going to go back to another pattern, right? If Mythos is the canary in the coal mine, and it generates, what I'm saying is it's a need for an operating model shift, okay? What is that operating model shift that we need to do? And if I need to make a change, that's an opportunity for people selling product, maybe for the incumbents as well, as Michael said as well. So I like to use NIST CSF 2.0. You know, it's govern, identify, detect, protect, respond, recover. I probably missed something in there. If you pick each one of those areas, there's a shift that needs to happen, right? So I'll pick governance for a second. We need to be able to govern, and there's opportunity there. But as somebody who I said, like, I didn't say this earlier, when I think of AI, speed, complexity, and scale. Those are the three key things that I think differentiate what AI is giving, whether it's the attacker or the defender. So if I need to get that speed, that complexity, and that scale, and use that on the defensive side. So what slows down speed of getting things out there in a corporation? Governance, right? So do you have a product that can basically allow me to not just check the box governance? I mean, the AI stuff is really complicated, and we were just talking about, you know, how we're using AI in our personal lives when we were waiting to come on stage, and how something as simple as, like, we gave it the VIN number and the paint color in the car it said was right, and it absolutely was sure it was right, and you ask it a million questions, it's right, and then you literally upload the sticker and say, but this is what it says. It's like, oh, sorry, I was wrong, right? That's what it is. It sounds so real, but it hallucinates. How do you get the right governance in there so that we can use the same technology that empowers, you know, the adversary or attackers, but make it safe to use in a company? So I need something that works with governance, but it makes things go faster. It streamlines that. I won't go through all of them, but I'll just give you like a taste of one more. Detection, right? When I think of detection in my world, I'm thinking of, like, I have a security operations center. It uses lots of technologies, many of which folks in the audience may sell. But I think about something you said, Mike, as well, which is I need to be able to move at speed with this. So I got a human in the loop, right, can't possibly keep up with a machine that's throwing stuff at you. So if I made an analogy, if I'm at one of those baseball practice things, right, and I go to the slow one and I've got my bat, right, I can bat a few of these away. If I go to the medium one, well, it's probably going to be faster than I can handle, but someone who's good at baseball, right, is going to be able to do that. If I go to the super fast one, like, I'm not going to be able to keep up. And if I turn all the super fast ones coming at me in 10 different directions, I'm toast, right? So something that can go that fast and be dynamic and do change-ups and all that, you need a technology. You got to fight fire with fire. So if you think about what it's like to be in a defender's position and think about what even the leading technologies have to offer, how can you get in there and do something that keeps up? Because at the end of the day, I really need the equivalent of an Iron Dome that's going to keep up with missiles that are constantly changing, that I know worked yesterday but isn't going to work tomorrow, and there's going to be real collateral damage, lives lost. So what can you give me that you're nimble enough that can stand up faster than CrowdStrike or Palo Alto or Microsoft or Zscaler, that's going to get in there and buy me time? Because I got to buy time. Maybe long run, you know, I won't be using your product, but there's an opportunity now to capitalize.
Are you, just to follow up on that, are you, like, I feel like, are you okay with some stuff breaking? You know, like, I feel like for a long time, when someone maybe have trying to get in your wallet, it's like there's a very low risk tolerance for, hey, if anything breaks, users start complaining. Is that pendulum maybe going to shift a little bit from your perspective, that you'll accept a little bit more breakage, if you will, inconvenience to users for better security?
Yeah, I think absolutely has to. What I'm hoping, though, is we don't have to wait to see everyone all of a sudden getting breached before we make that pivot. But that's going to be really hard, especially when you're tracking your SLAs, 99.99, whatever, however many nines in your availability, and you know that you have to put these patches without testing them as much out. It's going to cause problems. And even if it doesn't cause problems, like, you have it down pat, you've got a great testing cycle, you're getting them out there, every one of your vendors has the same problem. And not all those vendors have all the same horsepower that you may have as a company. So, like, when they can't keep up, those vendors that you thought weren't that critical, all of a sudden they go down, and you realize, oh crap, like, it just broke stuff I didn't really understand because my disaster recovery plans, my business impact assessments, my business continuity planning, all that wasn't as understood.
I promise this is my last follow-up,
Yeah.
and I'll come to you, Daniel. But I think the other thing that might be hard, and I've seen this happen, is the MBOs get misaligned, right? Like your uptime, the best thing to do is don't let any users in, and your uptime is going to be great. Don't let them break anything, right? You see that mismatch with maybe some of your MBOs with the expectations of users and board and other executives.
Yeah, I think part of being in these roles is being able to explain risk to audiences that are maybe not super risk fluent, right? And so you have to explain it. I would never go into a board and say, we're not going to get breached. Like you should fire me on the spot for saying that, because nobody can control that. What I can say is that we're building a very strong immune system. We're looking at all the threat intelligence for the latest flu strains and out there, and we're making bets to try to keep up with it. We're going to get sick. We're trying to detect that sickness really early so we minimize, our downtime and our impact. Very simply, catching cancer in stage 0 has a much better outcome than stage 4. So I think that's part of it, and that will help address the MBOs and all the different metrics and stuff that you'd be measured against and set expectations.
All right, coming to you, Daniel. I mean, you're on the front lines talking to folks on a weekly basis with the podcast, trending wise. What do people want to talk about when they give feedback to your podcast, come onto your podcast? What from a trending perspective, what are you seeing out there?
Yeah, I think that it's interesting because some of the themes that have been brought up here are kind of this move towards enabling agents to have actual agency in your environment, enabling automation. And you see that both on the, not only in cyber, but in the coding world. Obviously, that's been transformed kind of, and everyone here knows, we're in a room with a bunch of VCs. If your company is not enabling agentic-driven coding, then that's a liability. They're falling behind, right? And so there's this push towards agency and automation, but at the same time, like Mike said, we need to think about governance. And I think what's happening is we're seeing this shift towards agency and automation, and we're moving past the time when companies, because they're have been primarily selling kind of human-in-the-loop things. Now we're selling agents that actually perform automations and actions in your environment. It's no longer like, trust me, we implemented things great in our AI system. We're actually moving into an era when you're going to need to have exportable proof of how you are governing your AI system. So you see this with things coming up like AI UC1 and other things like that, where there's actually a growing number of whatever certification programs or things like you would think of with respect to like SOC 2 with auditors getting involved and like time periods of audit and exportable proof and all of these things. I think we're going to see that continue, especially as these companies actually introduce things into your environment that take, that actually automate and have agency. I think the other thing that we're seeing is that governance problem is getting increasingly complicated because the actual systems that these agents are built on are increasingly complicated. You can look at, if you happen to be one of the ones that downloaded Claude Code in that 3 hours when they leaked all of their IP, you could see hey, it wasn't really the model. This is, again, getting back to the mythos thing. It wasn't really the model that made the difference in Claude Code and how transformative it was. It was the agent harness around Claude Code that was the actual IP and did the heavy lifting. And that was a distributed system of things that, yes, was kind of doing things locally, but it was also connected into systems that you use, whether it's your code repositories or your infrastructure or other things. And so as we see this kind of growth in agency and automation, at the same time, these systems are becoming more complicated. And just like with microservices and that expansion, like the root cause analysis is becoming more difficult when the agents kind of go haywire. And then I think the third point that's contributing to that complication is this shift and growth of what some people might call like physical AI. we're going to see AI not only embedded in our SaaS products, right, but in all of these environments that we're operating in. There was the talk this morning about critical infrastructure. It's coming in there. It's coming in robotics, in manufacturing, financial services, in kiosks and retail environments or wherever. So we're going to see this embedded in a whole variety of complicated ways that are communicating with tools and models that are living in multiple places. And I think then that the ones that will rise to that challenge of governing that distributed system are the ones that are going to be kind of hopefully dealing with some of that pain in the gloom and doom scenario.
Just a quick follow-up that. Are you seeing any, I was talking to one of the other startups that was seeing resistance in his own organization, and eventually one of the blue portfolio companies had to fire two of his software developers because they would not get on board with leveraging coding assistance, right? And they've gone to a full and they've seen the productivity shipping code significantly faster. Are you seeing resistance in the folks that you're talking to out there as you're interacting with? It's almost like I can't get my brain around this. I've always done it this way, and I can't move forward with the new way of writing code?
Yeah, there's certainly a mix. I think, though, that we're starting to recognize generally in the software engineering community, like there's that one, someone can remind me after the panel, that one law that basically says as you add engineers to a project, the project gets slower, not faster. You don't build velocity. I think that's actually breaking right now. If you adopt AI technology in a way that actually allows it to have agency and automation in your organization. So I think engineers are realizing this, but it does require, like I say, even just speaking from personal experience, like I've gone through cycles of having to evaluate, like, what are my sacred cows here? And things like that I've always held so close to me, right? Like I'm not gonna duplicate code or functions or whatever across my code base. I would never do that. Like now, that does not matter at all. So you've got to sacrifice some of these things that you've held very closely for a long time. And I think that if you're not doing that, you're going to get left behind. And I personally want to see more PRs submitted by Claude month over month as my company goes along. That's the only way to survive.
Awesome. Michael, from an investor's perspective, trending, what are you seeing that's either interesting or disqualifying from you in the seed stage?
Yeah, as an investor, I think this is such an exciting time. Nothing has ever happened in my career, even my lifetime, that has been this disruptive in the technology sector. So that can be a little bit scary, but at the same time, hey, with disruption comes opportunity, and as an investor, that's what excites me. It's my job to try to figure out, try to come up with my crystal ball, even though nobody truly has one. Try to predict the future, place the bets, and then see if you're right. And there's just so much opportunity to do that. The way we look at it, like people say, like, oh, what kind of pitches do you get? I'm like, AI. Like everything we get is AI, whether it's really AI or not. Sometimes it's just lipstick on a pig, but everything is AI right now. And so we split it into security for AI, AI for security. Security for AI, that's a greenfields area. Like 2 years ago, nobody was buying a product to pen test their LLM. So that's a little more straightforward. I mean, it's brand new. There's lots to learn there, but there's clearly opportunity there. I actually think the more exciting side is the AI for security, and AI for everything for that matter, AI for real estate, AI for finance, whatever, because there's so much opportunity for what I call dinosaur disruption. These big companies that have just always been the big behemoth and they're hard to unseat. Well, if they don't move quickly enough, they're going to be unseated. But it's a tricky place to invest because there's so much money flowing in. And 2 years ago, a company that might have excited me now doesn't, because I have to think, are there barriers to entry? Could this be vibe coded in a weekend? And the way I tend to look at it is I try to split everything in that world into what I call workflow and scaffolding. And to me, workflow is just moving data around. whereas scaffolding has other elements that couldn't just be replicated. And a simple example, like a ticketing system, to me, that's pure workflow, right? You could replicate that. Whereas an email security system, that's got scaffolding. Now, AI is actually really good. Like, you could feed an email into an LLM and say, hey, is this like spam? Is this malicious? It'll tell you. But you can't tell all your employees, like, hey, every time you get an email, just feed it into ChatGPT and see if it's safe before you read it. Like, there's a lot of other elements there. And so, you know, I look for that, like, is there any defensibility in this product before I'm able to do it, able to place that bet. And I look at what are the things that are solvable today, thanks to AI, that were not solvable yesterday. I think a great example of that would be like automated pen testing. Like, I've been in security for 30 years. I've been promised purely automated pen testing, no human in the loop. I've been promised that for 30 years, and it hasn't emerged. Why? Because apps are very unique, and you can break things, and so you can automate a lot of it, but there was always a human in the loop. I absolutely think we're at the point where pen testing can be completely automated. But then the other part is there's so much money being poured in right now. You know, startups are raising seed valuations up to like $100 million and above, and they're getting $20 million on a PowerPoint deck. And I don't necessarily know which company will win in a space. What I do know is they're not all winning. You know, in the end, it's going to be the typical first place gets 70% of the market, second place gets 20% of the market, and everybody else is fighting over that last 10%. So that's an additional challenge right now. But again, hey, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. That's my job to figure out. So very exciting time right now.
Would you agree that, like, one of the things as you're talking, I'm thinking, like, that's really underappreciated is the cost for all this, right? I mean, cost is always an issue. But like, basically AI has been basically given away for free or very low cost. I mean, as a consumer, we get it almost for free in a Google search or whatever. Maybe you're paying $20 a month, but really at the end of the day, like, if you have a reasonable amount of money, it's not that big of a deal to get the value from it. But I was reading the other day that Anthropic just went on their enterprise customers where you got like this one, you know, you paid a certain amount and per person, and now it's gone to, like, instead of static cost, it's consumption based. Mm-hmm. Right? And I was at Microsoft last year, and the CEO was like, oh, everything's going to be just based on the cost of tokens going forward, and you're going to have to make this decision. So that's another point of differentiation. If you can come to the market, maybe it's not as good, maybe it's 85% effective versus 95%. But like, if your cost is like 15% of the 95%.
And predictable.
And predictable, right? And not a more deterministic cost versus non-deterministic cost.
I was just screwing around, and next thing you know, $10,000 bill, right?
Is that, I mean, do you see that as being like a key differentiator? We're not there yet.
Yeah, like, I think being compute constrained is like the biggest risk that a lot of these foundation models face. And like, as an investor, I was never a big fan historically of consumption-based pricing because I don't want to discourage people from using the products. But the reality is we're moving in that direction because, I think it's a real risk for Anthropic right now. Like, we were talking about Mythos. I think actually part of why it's not being released isn't just for them being altruistic about it. It's because they don't have the compute capacity to handle it. And because they're in a different, like, OpenAI took the risk of building tons of compute and, you know, had to raise tons of money, and like, are they in over their head? Are they, you know, have they diluted themselves too much? Whereas Anthropic took a different approach where they used the hyperscalers, but they're not in control of it. So, you know, there's a trade-off there. But yes, like, I actually think it's less, the biggest problem isn't going to be the constraint from compute. It's actually electricity. And now a lot of places are starting to ban AI data centers and things like that. So I think that's what we're going to run up against. But because of all those factors, I think usage-based pricing is just the reality. Like, even though I don't love it, I think that's where we're headed for everything.
All right, go-to-market trends, AI. What are you seeing out there? I know my own company, I'm seeing the volume and velocity of marketing materials and the quality of, like, there's a human in the loop, but it's like you can create really high quality white papers out there from a marketing perspective, very targeted marketing, What are you seeing from a go-to-market perspective?
But it's also shifting and making buyers more cynical, right? So I see a shift where the proof of value, like prove to me that you can do what you say you can, prove it quickly, and make it easy to buy, differentiating companies that are separating themselves from all the noise that's out there. Because buyers, I think the trend's been they're getting more and more cynical. There's a lot of startups where the destination and the brochure don't match. I'm sure you've seen that in your career a few times. So being able to prove the capabilities very quickly with as low friction as possible, right? So if it takes 90 days to evaluate something because of integrations, et cetera, the human capital cost alone for most organizations, it's too much of an investment. Prove it quickly, prove that you can deliver on what you said you could, but also make it easy to buy. And that goes back to how do you convince a CFO that there's not a lot of overlap with other controls. There's always consolidation that they're talking about internally within organizations. So for me, it goes back to focusing, especially as an early stage startup, on something that's just, don't build the platform, make it an inch wide, but a mile deep, be better than anybody else, demonstrate value very quickly. So I think those are the differentiators. And then for me on the identity side, what we're seeing is whether it's agentic, non-human, or human, forget the static entitlements. Let me know what my identities are actually doing in my environment. So I'll pick on myself. Like, okay, Silvio authenticated access anomaly, big deal. Is Silvio behaving the way he normally does? Hey, that's something we should look at. Not only is he not behaving the way he normally does, he's downloading a repo, he's doing this. Oh, his activity maps to the TTPs of scattered spider attacks. Guess what? We need to go investigate that. So seeing a lot of trends from runtime visibility and intelligence versus static entitlements, what someone entitled to do on paper versus what they're actually doing.
Great, great. All right, last question. We got 3 minutes. I don't plan on taking any questions here. Front page of the Wall Street Journal today talking about AI and whether it's cost savings or productivity, do more with the same, maybe slow down hiring. And you had on two sides of the debate, you had, Coinbase saying, hey, we're going to be a more profitable company because we're reducing headcount. Meta, we're investing in the infrastructure, we're cutting headcount. And then you had Axon saying, hey, the CEO literally sent a message to the employees, relax. They were one of the top performing S&P 500 of 2025. They do tasers and drones and things like that. Sent an email to employees, relax, we're going to be more productive. We're going to do more with the same amount of people. Maybe it slows down hiring. Do you have an opinion on maybe your organization or in general how organizations that you're talking to are thinking about, job creator, job destroyer, productivity enhancer, and, net neutral? How are your organizations thinking about that?
Yeah, so just to really quick, right? 2 words that I think about: disruption and uncertainty, not cost more or cost less. That's just how I think about it. I can say unequivocally for Navy Federal, we're on the side of we're going to be more productive. We are not planning to do any massive layoff. We've never done layoff in almost 100 years. It's not going to start now. Right. We are going to find a place for our people. They will get reskilled. You'll need to take initiative to do that. But we are all about using AI to assist the human, and we'll figure that out. But we've taken a very hard stance on that.
I remember earlier Sean Anderson, Boston Meridian, was talking about this, and the Wall Street Journal article referenced it too, the rise of the generalists, right? You talk about reskilling folks. It's like people that, he used, I think, the example of a biology major in his SOC, right? Someone that can just think creatively and wants to solve problems. So interesting take. Do you have, what's your feeling on it?
Yeah, I mean, from both the startup and the, I guess, podcast side, on the startup side, I don't know a startup that doesn't have an infinite roadmap of things to do. So I think the more productive you can be, the more, you need to be more productive. From the podcast side, I can tell you, even just a year ago, we had multiple people, human people behind the scenes that were doing this and that and editing and all of this stuff. And yeah, I forget the total number, 5 or 6 or something people that were involved in that process. We're down to a part-time person who's doing some things, and everything else is able to be done just as productively without the human in the loop. So certainly on that side, we've optimized towards that.
I think long-term, certainly it's a productivity play, but I don't think we're there yet. I think a lot of companies, I think all companies are working to figure this out. So I think a lot of the times you hear about a 20% layoff, it's actually less because they've figured it out and they have all these productivity gains. It's because they need to fund all the investment that they're putting into AI. I think companies are still figuring out general AI tools, and I have yet to see a large company where I think they're really killing it with agentic AI. So we'll get there, but it's going to take time.
Controlled productivity gains. And the reason I say that on the go-to-market side, I've noticed sales reps leveraging AI tools, note takers, et cetera. You know what went out the window? Active listening. Somebody else is taking notes. I'm going to get a summary of it, but you missed a lot of the context. You missed a lot of the human emotions, what's actually driving certain scenarios within an organization, what's going to elevate your POV from like number 12 to number 3, right? And that's something that AI can't do, right? So it's controlled productivity, but it has to be validated.
The number one question in my note taker is, what did he just say? So I agree with you on the listening piece. Yeah.
All right, we're going to make that the last word. Please give a round of applause to my panel. Incredibly easy panel to work with. Thank you. Appreciate it.